All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We're opening up Yunqing Zhou's structural analysis of classical Chinese philosophy. Specifically, we're zeroing in on Chapter 5 today because it outlines this ancient diagnosis of societal collapse that might absolutely shift how you view failed institutions in our modern world. We're talking about the Moist school of thought and their wildly radical idea that the very architecture of our social rules might be the exact thing destroying us. But to really get this, we gotta start with the story. Picture this. It's the spring of 440 BCE, and the state of Chu is preparing to attack the state of Song. It was going to be an absolute bloodbath. We're talking thousands dead for literally zero net benefit to either population. Now Mozi, a philosopher, calculated this immense harm, packed up his things, and walked on foot for 10 grueling days. He marches right into the court of Chu and essentially tells the king, "Kill me and the defense of Song holds anyway." He literally risked his own life for absolute strangers. And you know what? He succeeded. The attack on Song was completely abandoned.
So, looking at this incredible historical case study, I want to pose a question directly to you. Was this just personal heroism? I mean, was Mozi just the ancient equivalent of a comic book superhero making this singular massive sacrifice? Well, the standard historical reading might say yes, but the source text argues something far more profound. This wasn't some myth of personal heroism. This was a philosophical system functioning exactly as it was designed to. Mozi was simply occupying an office, the office of a moral agent, whose rules required intervention wherever an impartial calculation showed that net harm could be prevented.
Identifying the structural defect. The standard view back then, which was heavily championed by the Confucians, was that the societal collapse of the Zhou dynasty happened because people simply lost their moral substance. To them, the system was totally fine, but the people just became rule breakers, performing rituals theatrically without any real virtue. But the Mohists, they argued this diagnosis was completely backwards. They argued that societal harm is caused by rule followers. Think about that for a second. The damage wasn't happening because people were breaking the rules of society. The damage was happening precisely because they were following them to the letter. Let's use a modern analogy here. Think of it like a massive software bug. The Zhou ritual order wasn't a bad religion, and it wasn't suffering from some temporary glitch. It had a critical error hard-coded right into its base logic. The system was actually operating exactly as programmed, but the programming itself was fundamentally biased. The rules were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, and that was exactly the problem. Let's look at how this actually played out in everyday life to see the bug in action. Take the inheritance rules of the Zhou practice. The eldest son of the primary wife, he gets the primary lands. The younger sons, they get lesser portions. Daughters, they get absolutely nothing. Now, the Confucians saw this setup and thought it was just perfect, every single position receiving exactly what the cosmic and social hierarchy specified. But the Mohists looked at this practice and immediately saw an architectural error. They realized that partiality, this kinship-based preference, was baked directly into the DNA of the society's rules. And the crucial point we really need to grasp here is that this preference for your own family isn't just a personal psychological bias. In the Moist view, it is a constitutive defect. That means that particular interest, putting your own kin above strangers, is installed at the structural level of society. It literally defines the very offices people hold. If your societal role requires you to favor your family, then the office itself is corrupted from day one. No amount of moral cultivation can fix a defect that's built into what the office is constituted as requiring. Impartial governance becomes literally impossible because the rules explicitly demand partiality. The illusion of virtue. Let's walk through a specific and frankly wild historical example together. Consider the filial nobleman. According to the rules of the time, a truly virtuous son must mourn his parents for 3 full years. This meant completely withdrawing from normal life and providing lavish, incredibly expensive sacrifices. So this nobleman performs these mourning rituals flawlessly. And because he does this, he is universally praised by his family and by society as a highly virtuous man. He is the absolute picture of moral perfection according to the system. But here is the catch. To actually pay for this lavish 3-year funeral, he taxes the peasants on his land into absolute poverty. And this brings us to a really devastating realization. The nobleman is not a hypocrite. He isn't pretending to be good while secretly being evil behind closed doors. This system literally defines his virtue by how well he treats his kin. But because the system places kinship at the dead center of its moral universe, it structurally blinds him, and society as a whole, to the collateral damage he causes to strangers.
The practice constitutes his virtue, but it entirely fails to constitute what he's doing to those peasants as harm. When you are a partial observer, locked inside a partial system, you lose the ability to even identify genuine virtue.
The scale problem. Now, to be clear, the Moists weren't saying that loving your family is a bad thing, not at all. They were saying it's an architectural error to use family love as the foundational operating system for a massive state. Kinship works brilliantly for coordinating families, for sure, but it fundamentally fails to coordinate at scale. When you try to build a civilizational government out of family loyalties, you don't get a giant happy family, you just get warring families, which is exactly what was happening in 440 BCE. Instead, the Moist demand was for a totally new, impartial architecture based on universal interest. They argued that universal interest belongs at the practice level, where it grounds and justifies the rules of governance for everyone, equally.
Think about this in your own life for a second. Have you ever looked at a totally broken institution, maybe a toxic workplace, a failing government agency, or a gridlocked political system, and realized the problem isn't actually the people? We spend so much of our time blaming bad apples or demanding that people just be more virtuous. But what if, like the Moists diagnosed over 2,000 years ago, the rules themselves are the problem? What if the institution is perfectly executing a flawed, biased set of constitutive rules?
So, I'll leave you with this. If partiality, if this structural preference for our own groups, our own networks, our own kin, is built directly into the DNA of our modern institutions, can we ever truly achieve impartial justice? Mozi walked 10 days on foot to prove that an impartial structure could save thousands of lives. The question for us today is whether we are willing to look hard enough at our own rules to spot the bugs we've been calling features. Something to keep in mind as you navigate the systems around you.